Good afternoon and welcome to YALSA's webinar, Low Stress Strategies for the After-School Crowd, presented by Chris Shoemaker and Sarah Ludwig. My name is Nicole Gibby Mungia and I'm the Program Officer for Continuing Education for YALSA. I'd like to go over a few features of our webinar software before we get started. We will be communicating with each other via chat throughout the webinar. Please feel free to ask any questions that you have throughout the webinar via the chat box in the left-hand corner of your screen. If you would prefer to not see the chat box during the course of the webinar, you may click on the full screen button located on the upper right-hand side of your screen, and that will eliminate the chat and attendee list boxes. To undo the full screen option, just click on that same button again. At the upper left-hand side of the screen, you should see an image of a person with her hand raised. If you click on the down arrow next to the image of the person, you'll see that you have a whole variety of options, which include raising your hand, laughing, giving applause, or agreeing or disagreeing with a point. If at any point during the webinar you experience audio issues, please type into the chat box to let me know and I'll work with you to resolve them. Following this presentation, you'll receive a copy of the slides from the PowerPoint as well as the recording. If you would like to receive a certificate of participation, please contact me following the webinar via email and I'd be happy to send that along to you. I'm pleased to introduce our speakers for today's webinar, Chris Shoemaker and Sarah Ludwig. Take it away.
Well, wonderful. We are so glad to be here with you today to talk a little bit about low-stress strategies for engaging your crowds of teenagers. I will let Sarah go first and talk a little bit about herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Ludwig. I am the Library Department Chair at a preschool through grade 12 independent school in Hamden, Connecticut. So I work with kids of all ages, but I serve sort of as the de facto middle and upper school librarian as well. So I'm working with teens all the time. Go ahead, Chris.
And I'm Chris Shoemaker. I handle all of the teen programs for the 87 branches of the New York Public Library down here in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island. You can follow me on Twitter, or you can shoot me an email with any questions or comments. I am also a member of the YALSA board, and if you haven't voted yet, a candidate for YALSA president. So what we want to talk about today, we will be talking about strategies for changing teen behavior in the library, ways that you can design effective programs to help deal with large audiences in your library after school, or whenever you have teens that need a little bit of control, and how you can work with large groups of casual crowds of teenagers, teens who are just dropping in, hanging around at the library, but not really doing all that much. We want to help you address any teen behaviors that happen and increase teen engagement with library resources and programs. We'll also cover strategies for changing behavior through reinforcement, involvement, and developmentally appropriate ways. We'll talk with you a little bit about programs you can offer in library spaces to help connect to youth. And again, we'll talk about those crowds and those chaos and those hordes. I just want a quick question for our audience, and you can go ahead and type this in the chat box in the lower right left-hand side. My screen is backwards in my head for some reason. I was just wondering if you could type in what type of library you're working for. I mean, I see the Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, so I kind of know what that one is. But some of our individual guests, if you wouldn't mind sharing, what type of library you work with. Seeing a lot of public libraries. Nope, even more. Couple of teen service managers. Cool. Well, I think we have a very strong public library staff. Are there any school librarians or people who work with schools? Woohoo! Okay, so I guess we're a 99% teen audience, teen public library audience here. In case I missed you and you are working in a school library, or maybe your public library is structured a little more like a school library, I'm really glad to have my colleague Sarah presenting with me today, because I know that I am super focused on public libraries, and Sarah has a really wide range of experience with both public and school libraries, so she helps temper sometimes my crazy wild ideas. So the 3 skills that are necessary for working with teenagers, and to work effectively with teenagers, are crowd control, program design, and behavioral management. And what I mean by that is the ability to handle large crowds of teenagers in a calm and controlled manner, the ability to really drill down and find out what makes your group of teens tick, what makes them connect with the library, what they're interested in, what they're passionate about. And finally, of course, the patience to work with them and to deal with some of the less appropriate teen behaviors and actions. I'm sure we all love working with our teenagers, and every so often we wish that they would stop doing one or more of the things that they like to do in the library. So I want to paint a little picture for you. You're in your library, it's the after school hours, and you are all alone. If you have extra staff, then unfortunately they are busy, booked, out sick, whatever happens, you are alone in your library. And in a twist of fate, every single chair is taken. All of the teens have decided that this is the day that they want to visit you. So chairs are taken, they're standing in the aisles, they're hanging out on the floors, and there are more pouring in through the door. It's loud, it's crazy, and again, it's just you. So in the chat box on the left-hand side of the screen, just go ahead and share your immediate reaction or your what you think you would do in that moment. Make faces. Oh, Cindy, this just happened yesterday. Oh, can help. Donna, pray. Yes. Stacy, very interesting. I like how you think. CLP, engage them. Cindy, talk with them. Yes. I from praying to begging for help to seeking ways of engaging them, those are all the things that we're going to be talking about today, and those are all the right things that you should be doing. So, teen services as acupuncture. You can see teen behavior and engagement management is all about watching for those pressure points and then hitting the release valve. When you obviously aren't going around poking teens with needles, at least I hope you're not. You want to look at it as tempering as well. You're finding those weak spots, which are those periods where teens are bored or disinterested or not connected with the library, and you get there to provide some extra coverage. With teens in after-school environments, one of the biggest motivators is boredom. It builds up when teens are bored, and it leads them to be disconnected from the programs and activities that you're offering them. It builds up into negative behaviors and then gets released as acting out or loud noises or all sorts of things that you don't necessarily want happening in your library. And that's why we jump in, as Cindy has suggested, as CLP has suggested. You find those moments, you jump in, and you give them a program, a book, movies, or even just stopping by to say hello. It releases that boredom valve, it helps them get focused, it releases the tension or the pressure of the environment, and helps them calm down, rethink, and hopefully get engaged with the library a little bit more. So what are some of those pressure points that you see on a regular basis in your library. And go ahead and type those in the chat box on the left. When do you have that sense where your teen crowd is shifting from good behavior into bad behavior, or when the boredom is building, or the disinterest? Roughhousing, yes, definitely. Thank you, guest. Oh, Stacy, paper airplanes. CLP, I think I'm going to have to steal that one. Flirty time. Oh, Donna, that's a good point. Teens do bring in the rest of the day with them. It's not just a matter of what they see in the library, but there's all the parts of their day, their experiences at home, their experience with their peers that come into the library with them. Oh, Anna, yes, your catalyst teens. I think there's lots of research that could definitely be done on those types of teens, and we'll be talking about strategies for dealing with them in a little bit. And Donna, I think we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies that we have to deal with those issues that come in as well. So this is not a recommended method for dealing with teens. Just maybe click on your little person and raise your thumb if you've heard of the mosquito, or if you are familiar with the musical broadcasts. So Jen, anybody else familiar with these methods of crowd control? So the mosquito is a small high-pitched buzzer that can be installed generally in shops or public places, and it emits a very high pitched noise that really resonates within the hearing of younger people, mainly teenagers. And so when they hang around these spaces where the mosquito is installed, all they hear is a high-pitched buzzing. So like anybody who's had tinnitus, that's basically what these teens are hearing all the time. So it discourages them from hanging around, from engaging, from being in the space. The same thing for the music broadcasts. It's very boring classical music played at just the volume that sort of keeps teens from feeling safe, from feeling that the space is open to them, that inhibits their ability to converse. It's not played very loud, but it's played consistently, and it's played in the background. And the reason that these are not really going to be effective methods for dealing with any sort of after-school crowd is they're sort of permanent. I mean, if you set up these things, you're broadcasting the message that teens are not welcome in this space in any time, in any way, shape, or form. It's also very passive. It's not a way to engage them. It's not going to help correct behavior that's inappropriate. It's just going to stifle it all. And so it's also very disrespectful towards your youth. You're not going to be able to develop a relationship with them and help engage them in other ways because, again, you're saying you're not welcome here. Buzz off, if you'll excuse a pun. So the first strategy that we have for dealing with your after-school crowds is crowd control. This is a very basic skill, but it's one of the most important ones. It boils down into these 3 points that are on the screen. Stay involved, know your community, and break it down. I chose the little icon of the fish pond because that will help deal with your catalyst teens. Break the crowds down whenever you can. Keeping teens in smaller groups helps them engage with their peers. It's the big fish in the little pond scenario. Your teen catalysts tend to be seeking attention or looking for it, and if they're put in a big group, then they need that energy, they need that focus, and they're going to act out and get the attention that they're craving. If you keep them in a smaller group, you can help contain their influence. You can get them focused on more positive things, whether that's helping you accomplish a project or just helping you manage the room and their friends. It's also very important to know who your community is for after-school audiences. If you are looking for different strategies that will work, and who your community knows, if you report on negative behavior to parents, especially with public libraries, if you're in a middle to large sized library, generally the parent is not all that effective because the parent isn't necessarily involved with the library. They don't know you as the youth serving professional. They don't know what their kids are doing after school. They just know that they've been told to go to the library and stay there, and so they assume that everything is fine and dandy. They'll probably blow off any notes that you might send home if they even make it to home afterwards. But for smaller public libraries, you might have better luck with parents or an immediate caregiver reporting to them, not reporting, but keeping them involved, letting them know if there are behavioral issues. It depends on the relationships that you have with the larger community. Also, staying involved in the space is very important. When teens know that you're there, when you're hanging around, when you're active, when you're moving, they are less likely to get up to trouble and misbehave. So avoiding the back room, avoid using security mirrors as your main means of watching a space. If the mirrors are necessary, then by all means have them, but don't, sit somewhere completely removed from your teens and watch them through the mirror. They want the space to be theirs, but they also will respect you for sharing it with them. And Sarah.
So in talking about schools, there's a couple things I just want to mention kind of right off the bat, philosophies that I have about the after-school crowd in schools. The first one is that I just think the school library should be open as late as possible. In my school, we stay open until 4 until the winter, and then we stay open until 5 because it's cold and dark out and we want the kids to have somewhere to go. And I just feel like if it's possible to avoid closing your doors right at 3 o'clock or as soon as classes are over, it will make the library a place where the kids want to be, and it'll make the library a welcoming space. I feel like the more welcoming you can be, the more respectful the teens are of the space. But I also talk about how the school library differs from in the after school time versus the during the school time. And I think it's okay to allow the atmosphere of the library to change, to make it a special time that's different from the academic day, which means you can kind of change your rules and expectations depending on the crowd. So sometimes that means you can let them be a little bit louder than they are during the day, or you can let them watch YouTube videos if you don't let them do that during the day, or play video games. And it can be hard sometimes for school librarians to make that jump. Well, all day long we've been asking them to be quiet and asking them to focus on their homework, and now it's 3 o'clock and everything changes. But I think their needs and expectation, the teens' needs, are different after school. So acknowledging that and allowing them a little bit more leeway and freedom is going to go a long way toward making it a more warm and welcoming space. Back to you, Chris.
Okay. So, just show of hands, show of thumbs. Idle hands are the devil's playground. General familiar statement for us? Yes. Well, in this case, idle hands lead to more than the devil's playground. They lead to very unhappy librarians. So in this part, we're going to talk about some strategies that you can use to get kids connected with the library and get them a little more engaged. When there's nothing to do, or when the teens tend to be in an unfocused environment, then the temptation to make their own fun or activity kicks in, and you are left with wrestling, paper airplanes, flirty time, swearing, and everything in between. So get them doing, get them connected, and get them building. How many of our participants are familiar with the term Hamago? And I'll type that into the chat box for you. Anybody? Does it ring any bells? Kathy? Oh, okay. Um, Hamago refers to hanging out, messing around, and geeking out, which is a theory of youth engagement proposed by Mimi Ito. There's several books out around it. That's sort of the shortened way of saying it. And you'll see there are some connections between what I talk about here and that philosophy. So if you're familiar with it, great. If you're not, it's definitely something to consider in your youth services. We talked a little bit about that in the competencies for young adults, and also in some of our other webinars, so you can access those on demand. So get your teens doing something. As we said, when they're in the library and not doing anything, that's the time where you're going to see the pressure build. That's where they're going to get bored, and that's where they're going to be looking for their own things to do. These are all really simple things that you can have teens do. What you're looking for here are things that are more drop-in activities. They don't require a lot of commitment from your teens, and they require just a little bit of explanation or a very low energy threshold. So these are things they don't have to commit to. They can pick them up and drop them, and they're not going to feel super invested in that. Again, these are things to do when it's like there are 50 kids and you need something instantly, and maybe you don't have anything to pull out of your back pocket except for this. These are the activities for slouching teens who, they're not going to sit up and engage with you, but they're going to hang out and they'll play around a little bit. Paper crafts are always a great answer. There are templates that you can download and print out and have them fold. They make for very nice displays. You can include them in bulletin boards or display ideas. You can also have teens help you craft your displays, have them help you pick out the popular titles that they've been reading or that they just brought back. You can have them develop their top 10 lists, wish lists, anything like that. Simple things that can go up and be visible. Those will help act as a stamp of ownership on the space and help the teen remember that the library is somewhere where they do have fun and where they are engaged and where the staff is listening, participating, watching, and engaging with them. There's also gaming activities. These can be tabletop games, video game systems, any sort of thing like that. Again, short, simple, easy. They can get as engaged with those as they want. If they are interested in playing around, all that sort of stuff. Homework help, if your teens are looking to get more help with their homework, get assistance, struggling with something, this is a great opportunity to, again, break them down into small groups, make sure that they stay focused and engaged, and work hard at what you need them to do. Promotional videos, have them film 30 seconds of why the library is awesome, what they like, what they're doing. All these very simple, quick, easy things that require minimal effort. And Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about some programs that would be appropriate for schools. A lot of what Chris just mentioned would be great for schools. But if you want to go more toward the academic side of things, you can have peer homework groups or writing groups or research groups meet in the library. Certainly you could have gaming clubs meet. We have at my library, we have Scratch clubs and we have Minecraft clubs, which have both been extremely successful in engaging the kids. You can also have your students create materials to promote the library. I'm especially interested in having kids create videos that can provide virtual tours of the library and the library's resources. And kids can also create collection tools. They can write reviews for you. They can put up signs and stickers on books. They can do displays for you. And I'm sort of a fan of the idea of having some sort of meeting or club or group, whether informal or more formal, every day that the school library is open after school. I think it gives the students a sense of what to expect, and it lends the library a sense, it gives the library some structure, and especially for students who often are just in the library waiting to be picked up. I saw someone mention that earlier. That's a pressure point for you waiting for mom and dad to come pick up the kids. It's not just a holding pattern that they're in, it's actually a destination. They have something to do there. So all of those things I think can work really well in schools.
Thanks, Sarah. These teams are also going to serve as your taste spotters. They are going to be ones who are very connected with pop culture, very connected with all sorts of trends and currents, and you can use them as your spotters. Find out what's hot, what's coming up next, what TV show are they talking about, maybe see what you have in your collection after they leave that would tie in. Help get them involved with your social media at the library, depending on what you're able to do, whether it's Tumblr or Facebook or what. Have them post things, and even if you can only keep them engaged for a few minutes, don't worry. You can use the scheduling feature to get them engaged, and that way they're surprised because they'll see, hey, I did that last week, and it's now popping up on the library's social media account. So I have a quick poll for you. And it's going to pop up in the screen. So just go ahead and click as to what you might be using. And I think I set it up wrong, so you can only vote once. So basically, everybody's using Facebook in their library. If you want to type something in the chat box, maybe about one of the other platforms that you're using that you weren't able to vote on, I'd love to see what everyone is using. We'll just cover up who we are. Oh, okay, Anna, Pinterest. Oh, Robin, yes, definitely. Instagram is one of the top sources of teen interaction online. CLP everywhere plus Instagram. Robin, if you don't mind, just how are you using Instagram in your library, or how so, or maybe CLP if you want to type that in. Go ahead and close the poll and get it out of our way. Well, so after you've got, okay, so program photos, book recommendations, behind the scenes, all those other things, and great ways to share out what's happening at the library. So once you've got your kids doing a few drop-in things, but you still might be having problems, they might not be using the library, but at least they're sitting there quietly. What our goal next is to help continue to make sure that the behavior stays appropriate, that your spaces are under control, that the teens are engaged, having fun in the library, and that's where this connected piece comes in. You can see mentor, memorable, and materials-based. So remember that. So make sure that your teens don't get tired of you. We love them and they love us, but sometimes it can be just like a teacher talking at you every single day. So switch it up. Bring in a special guest face that will make it a little more interesting or exciting. If you're a macrame and a cooking champion, maybe bring in somebody who has the expertise in knitting or paper mache or something that's slightly different. Just so that they can see more faces. It also helps build their engagement with community and establish stronger relationships with the library, because when they see these different faces come in, they know that these are people who are interested in working with them, who are interested in their lives, who want to help them, who want to be a part of it. And that will definitely go a long way to helping deal with both the crowds and helping them with their behaviors. When you tend to do a program over and over again, it gets kind of tiring. Gaming is the exception because it's a little bit different. There are all those variables that are built in. They can't shoot the same monster in Halo the same way. They won't race Mario Kart in exactly the same way. There are all these little factors that can change. But some of the things like crafts or face painting or even cooking to a certain extent, they can start to get a little familiar, and having an element of change definitely is something that will help your kids stay engaged, stay focused, and help their enthusiasm keep from waning with the library. Mixing things up, bringing in different flavors of program types, of activities, those are definitely things that will help you deal with teen boredom in the library. One of the things that we tend to forget is the connection back to our libraries and our organizations. So make sure that your teen crowd knows why the programs are happening in the library. Bring in your outside materials, book lists, videos, CD collections, highlight things online. Just really help them to see what the library is doing in the physical space, in the teen center, while they're hanging out, can be translated into something that they can keep learning, keep doing, and keep exploring. Grab those paper mache books, your canning, your homework, gaming stuff, have that all on hand and show the teens where they can discover more. They will be motivated to go look, and you'll be able to help control your teen space again and keep them engaged and looking and having a good time. And Sarah.
So I feel like in a school you have a unique opportunity to work with your fellow faculty members. Chris talked about bringing in experts to engage the teens more in the public library, and I think there's room for that in the school library as well. I think just in general, faculty buy-in in the library is extremely important. You have to be communicating with your faculty about the mission of the library and what you're trying to do, and especially if they come in after school and you've got a bunch of kids playing board games and making music videos, you don't want them to think that you've lost all control. So just letting your faculty know what you're trying to do with that after-school crowd is really important, and then maybe reaching out to some people who could be partners with you. So are there faculty members who are already running clubs who would like to move their clubs into the library? A lot of clubs lend themselves very well to that environment. Amnesty International or the Chess Club or the Sci-Fi Club, any of those clubs, if they're sitting in a cramped room, maybe they would prefer to come into the library. I also think that faculty can perhaps create new programs with you. So meet with a faculty member who has similar interests and see if they would like to do something with you, a writing club, photography club, something that would fit well with the library environment but that you are also personally interested in. I think actually that's a very important point, because I think a lot of us try to do programming that we're not personally connected to, and teens can tell that you are kind of making it up as you go along. So I think find the things that you really like and that you can really get into, and I think that the students will be able to tell. I'm just reading this question, but I think I'm going to let Chris field that in a second. And also, I think, like I said, if there are existing groups that are already meeting, have them meet in the library. And the fact is, you want the faculty to be present in the space. I think especially with schools, if you're the lone librarian, which most school librarians are the only librarian in their building, it helps if you've got an English teacher or a math teacher just coming through to show the kids another face and to lend you some support, especially on the days when you can't get anyone to calm down and the noise level is out of control. And I believe that, it's not necessarily that as a school librarian you don't have the same authority as a classroom teacher, but just changing it up a little bit and reminding the students that you have the support of their teachers is always really important. So
Anna, that's always one of those things, and that's ties into what we're going to talk about at the very end when we refer to both standards and buy-in for rules. What we've had some success with in the past is just really explaining to the club why these rules and situations exist, helping them establish their own section where they can be maybe a little bit louder, whether that's in the community room or within a part of the library, and having them have a little bit of display space, something that really helps them feel ownership of that chunk, but being also at the same time enforcing, like, this is also part of the larger library. We do need to respect how everyone is using the space. And we'll talk about sort of consequences of actions, and that might be something that you would have to use at least a couple of times. So you mean cliques and things like that of teens. Cliques are always really challenging to deal with. It's a matter of, again, being visible, being out there, and going around talking to them, greeting them by name, and then using those connections to find out what they're engaged with, and being able to build a program or an activity or direct their energy into something. So shelving or volunteering or specific types of activities. But it all starts with going in and not getting in their faces, but being a face that they recognize and know.
And someone had mentioned earlier the paper airplanes, which is a problem in my library as well. And it's funny because I noticed, I didn't do this on my own, but I noticed that a bunch of kids were then trying to build like the best possible paper airplane that could fly the furthest. And so I kind of gave them the space to do that because it turned into this really creative endeavor. And I gave them parameters for how to do that. But I think, if some of those teens on the periphery of the clubs, maybe they want to join the club, or maybe you can talk to them about how they can start their own. And I also love what Brenda said about teaming up with the public library. I think that's a great idea. I would love to have the public library come bring some programs into the school and vice versa. So just wanted to call that out from the chat.
And Rebecca, I really like your point. Having a teen section icebreaker is a good strategy, and you can make it more ridiculous. Types of pie, favorite flavor ice cream, Batman versus Spider-Man, anything that sets up a really fun dynamic and encourages discussion, like, how can you like butter pecan ice cream? It's terrible. No, it's awesome. That helps break it down, and then those are things you can file away for later and maybe do, a surprise ice cream party with everybody's favorite ice cream much later down the line. Guest, when one of the strategies that very good, Anna, laptops, circulation, things like that, working with your circulation staff and having them greet people by name, that helps. If you happen to be at a shared desk, then you can listen. For libraries who wander in their teen spaces, you can overhear names. You can introduce yourself. That's always a good strategy. Pretty up forward. Most times teens are not accustomed to adults who introduce themselves and say, hi, how are you, welcome. It's more like, I am Mr. So-and-so, and these are my rules for class, for after-school programs, for participation. And so just sometimes a simple introduction will get you what you need.
And also, if you have an active teen group who can kind of help you out with that they can lend a hand. So if you know a dozen kids, maybe one of them will be in the space and can kind of point out some of their peers to you.
Good point, Sarah. Finally, when you're looking at getting teens engaged and helping deal with those after-school crowds and behaviors and activities, any progress that you made, you're going to want to keep building off of. So as Sarah was just saying, use your teens who know one another, get them involved with the teen advisory group, help them build their space. YALSA has very helpful teen advisory group guidelines if you've never started one up or if you're looking to build one. And that will definitely help you deal with your crowds. They'll become your enforcers in a way, and they'll also be the ones who will be able to give out who will be able to tell you other kids' names, who they are, maybe what they like, if they all go to the same school, things like that. And you also just want to keep them building. So that means building their own displays, making their own spaces, picking their own decorations, anything that really helps develop skill and impact. You can use them to produce a welcome video for your library. You can use them to produce a guide that goes up online. You can have them manage your social media pages in some small part. Mock prints competitions, web content, all those sorts of things will help keep them building and keep them focused, give them things to do, and help you build your stronger relationship. So for guests, is there a privacy issue with finding out names? Depending on your rules, some libraries have rules and regulations that state all borrowers must present their card, so you can scan it and find out their name. Sometimes, depending on the computer system that you use for tracking internet participation, it'll reveal a name or something like that. I would say that if you don't have a relationship with your teens, you'll probably want to go around and talk with them. If you're having behavioral issues, then you would probably want to collaborate with security because while you want to respect your teen's privacy, you may need additional documentation like phone numbers or things like that. But schools might have slightly different rules on accessing accounts of their students. I don't know, Sarah?
I know all of my kids' names, and we are pretty protective of their library accounts, which is hard in the schools because everyone always wants to know, oh, the book's not checked out. Well, who has it? And we can't tell them. So we are an independent school, so we are a little bit more relaxed than public schools, but we're pretty protective of our students' information.
Cindy, here at the New York Public Library, we do have security guards through a contracted security firm. There are also security supervisors who work on a borough level to handle patron complaints, behavior, security issues, threats, and things like that. If you don't have security, then just work with your library administrators to find out what the policies are on accessing records for disturbances and things like that. And not only just disturbances, but really the best strategy is to always just walk around and introduce yourselves to your teens, so that way you set up a positive relationship rather than, I'm an adult who's spying on you and now I know your name and I want you to come and behave in my library. The good ways and bad ways. Finally, changing the behaviors. You've got your programs and you've been managing the crowd, but sometimes things just aren't going to change without some additional rules or impacts or consequences. So this is very, very important to have these rules set out very clearly, but also to have the expectations and the consequences, because ultimately teens will be choosing their consequences, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But when you're setting your standards, always remember to try and bring your teens into the conversation. Libraries are slightly more flexible in most cases with their rules than other environments, and so when you can give teens input into those rules, it will help you get their buy-in and help you when they are looking to follow them or not follow them, as the case may be. That you don't have to change all the rules to suit them, but being flexible on things, especially like noise level or snacks, the number of people on the computer, things like that, those will definitely be helpful. You should always have high expectations for your teens, even if at the moment they're behaving absolutely abominably. if your room is out of control, if you've got large hordes who are messing around and creating problems. Always have high expectations. Teens know what expectations are set for them, and they will strive for that. So if you have low ones, they will hit the threshold, and that'll be it. If you've got high ones, they will strive for that. Obviously, they're not going to, come in formal wear and greet each other as, Madame and Sir and wear monocles, but just really have high levels. You also really have to set equal expectations. Teens will be able to recognize if you have a favorite group that you maybe don't enforce the rules with, or if you flex the rules a little bit. They can have 4 people at a computer, but this teen can only have 2 because they perceive that you don't like them. Even if the group of 4 gets even louder than the group of 2. So the rules have to apply across the board. There can't be any excuses on our end as the youth serving professionals, and there can't be any wiggle room. Any perception of bias will leave you in the lurch. Sarah, you had something that you wanted to say with this as well, right?
Yeah, I also have a library advisory board that's made up of students, and they've been very helpful. We have a unique problem at my library, which is that we have one big room full of chairs, and I'm sure some of you have a similar situation of you just have one space. It's not versatile at all, so you just kind of cram all your kids in there and just hope that they can keep it under control. So I've really turned to my library advisory board for help because I've tried some tactics and they haven't worked. And so the kids have been really great about not only giving me ideas, but also communicating with their peers. So, they'll say to kids who are not meeting our expectations, you can't do that, which is great. It means so much more coming from a peer than it does from me. And I also I really also want to stress the point that Chris made about setting equal standards because I think it's very easy to, that you have, especially in schools where you do form these relationships with students, you do have students who you want to let get away with stuff. Maybe they're the kids who are on the library advisory board. Maybe they're the ones who are acting out, and so you kind of want to give them a pass. But oh my gosh, every time I do that, I get called out by my students so quickly. So I think it's really very important to try to hold fast and be strong, even if it's a student that you like. I mean, we all have students we like, so we kind of can't pretend that we don't. And I agree about the high standards. I mean, in schools especially, the library serves a certain need. The students who are in there during the day need to be doing their work. They need to be working together on homework and collaborative projects. So the other students in the space need to respect that. We basically, after being warned twice, will ask a student to leave the library, and they are welcome to come back later on when they can be more respectful of the space, and that seems to work pretty well, though I really don't like asking kids to leave the library if at all possible. But sometimes you don't have a choice because the room is too full. And I think in the after-school time, again, your expectations change. You still need to have high expectations, but you're no longer necessarily serving those academic needs. So as long as you're clear with the students and you let them know it's 3 o'clock, now you can take out the chessboard, but I still expect you to be respectful of the space. I think that's okay. The kids on your library advisory board can also communicate library expectations in other ways. They can make videos about the library and your expectations. They can speak to the student body in assemblies. They can broadcast information out in whatever sort of intranet system you have. They can write articles about the library for the newsletter. They can be great mouthpieces for you in terms of sharing with the rest of the school what your expectations are for the space.
So when it comes down to behavior modification and rule enforcement, it's choices. when you present a situation, it's a choice between you are choosing to follow the rules and engage with the library, um, or you are choosing to accept these consequences, which can be leave, be quiet, lose your computer privileges. It, when you frame the consequences in that way, that's very important. But besides how you frame it, remember you can't back down from the consequences. You have to stick with your threats. So make sure that they are thought out and implementable. We were having a side conversation in the chat box with parents. If you tell a kid that they can't come back until they bring a parent, sometimes that works in a community and sometimes it doesn't. So you can't let them sneak back in after a week if you specifically said I have to meet with your parent because of your behavior. And so really, I recommend avoiding I'm going to call the cops if at all possible, because then you're dependent on an outside person to enforce your threat, which always is an untenable position. This part came up. Don't depend on parents and caregivers. They can be helpful, but again, if you can't get in contact with them, you can't explain the situation, they might not be able to help you enforce what's happening. Oh, Donna, that's definitely a question that comes up. But so again, teens choose their behavior and they choose that this will happen or that will happen, and you must follow through, because otherwise you'll never be able to discipline your space effectively. So just remember. Oh yeah, Sarah.
Sorry. I think I agree so much, because I, as the librarian, am sometimes very tempted to call in like the heavy, our dean of students, when things do get really out of control in the library. But I do it only when absolutely necessary, because I think it completely undermines my authority. And I think it's much more important for me to establish those boundaries and that follow through with the students, as opposed to basically saying to them, well, I can't handle you, so I'm going to call in someone else who can. So I think if at all possible, if you can be the one meting out the justice, I think it really can go a long way toward getting the kids to respect you.
And I'm just typing on the side, but I have found that for teens who are rude or backtalk or are deliberate, when you can separate them from their friends, generally, their friends will start to get up and leave, and so you can escort them. But if you have the teen who's like, I'm not moving, I'm being rude, just standing out, repeating your point, making them slightly uncomfortable by your presence and being there. It's definitely something that you can do. Just taking that deep breath and not reacting, because part of the reason for that behavior is to get a reaction. So just being very calm, clear, I'm sorry, you need to leave the library. That behavior isn't appropriate. That language isn't appropriate. You can come back tomorrow. It'll be a clean slate, but you have to leave the library for today. But again, just keeping your reactions calm and measured so you don't inspire that. So just remember, for your ultimate low stress strategies for the after school crowds, take care of the large group, provide things to do, and enforce the rules that have been set. Those will help you with your environment, help you get what you need, help you manage your space, and make sure that your teens are safe and connected. We're going to jump ahead just so you can see these further resources, and these will be included in the slides that come to you. Some space guidelines, some videos from YALSA's Academy that will help you out, and also some guides to starting teen advisory groups and teen engagement. So we have about 5 minutes. I'm sorry that I talked for so long, but are there questions or comments that you might have before we finish? And go ahead and type those in the chat box on the left side of the screen.
Stacy, that's what I do too. I'll say to the student, if you need to do this, whatever this is, that's fine. You'll just need to find another place to do it. And if you choose to stay in the library, then you have to follow the rules. And I think that you're not saying like, I hate your behavior, you need to stop your behavior. It's your behavior is not appropriate for this space, so you need to find somewhere else to go.
Molly, I think that's where staff meetings come in. Most of the time, those are your opportunities to help everybody set the ground rules and see that they're all on the same page. I know it's definitely a challenge to have everybody be part-time, because then there's no one voice that's there throughout the whole day. But to make sure that everybody can agree on a level of noise, on number of kids per computer, that everybody is committed to participating. So just making sure that you work together as a staff to come together on equal agreements. And when they're not interested in anything, that's definitely the time for you to turn over and be like, so, well, what would you like to do in the library? I've got paper making, I've got knitting, I've got X, Y, Z. You don't want to be too broad with that, because if they're not engaged, it's going to be such a threshold to think of what will engage them. But having a large number of suggestions and then being able to adapt them. So we like wrestling. Well, okay, so here's some wrestling magazines. Here are some trading cards. Let's talk wrestling. Let's fold frogs out of paper because you're really into dissecting frogs in biology class or things like that. So just being able to have those specific things that can help you on a laundry list will definitely work. Cindy, when physical intimidation gets involved, that's definitely when you're going to want another party involved, just because when that level is occurring, you're going to want either a backup or an alternate voice or a witness to help with documentation and things like that. That's also when you would go to your heavy level threat. But again, calm, clear, and collected. Donna, I've never been able to set those time limits. It can be a challenge. Maybe drop in activities for them, because you are if the library's nearby, it's always nice that they feel that the library is their safe space and that they can come in. I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything to jump on.
Yeah, I really like the idea of having like that laundry list of stuff. I also have a hard time with the number of people in a space, because I think, like we've been saying all along, the more people, the harder it is to control the crowds. So that's why I think the structure can really help if you've got something to do at all times. The kids have a reason to be there as opposed to just needing a couch to sit on. But I know that's not always possible. I really like the idea of having passive programs. Have a cabinet full of craft supplies that the kids can just go rummage through and do stuff with. It gives them a reason to be there, and that helps in terms of just having, kids who are wandering through the space with no real purpose. Yeah, I know. They can be hard to engage. I absolutely understand. And I think if there's even one who you can engage with who could sort of help you, just if you could talk to them, and I'm a big supporter of just being very upfront with teens. Listen, I'm having a really hard time knowing how to help you guys and how to give you something fun that you want to do. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that? And then even if they say things that you think, well, that's not a library activity or that's not something that I can do, maybe it can turn into a library activity. So if all they want to do is watch really stupid videos on YouTube, can that turn into something more like a movie making activity or an animation activity, or vote for your favorite stupid YouTube video, or whatever it is that you can come up with?
Yeah, that's definitely where you just leverage that. Hi, I'm Donna. I'm your librarian. Thanks for coming. Who are you? You keep an eye out for whatever spills out from their backpack. Whatever books they leave behind, whatever they do. Just all those tiny, tiny clues that will help you establish more of who they are and what they might want to do with the library. I hate to cut us short, but I'm just going to jump back real quick because we're basically out of time. If you want to get in contact with Sarah or I with other questions, we would love to chat with you and help you out, and be able to answer anything that we weren't able to get through. And thank you, CLP. That's definitely definitely a good point. So I think I turn it over to Nicole so we can close it out.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Again, if you would like to receive a certificate of attendance, feel free to email me following the webinar. I will also email links to the recording and the slides to everyone, and we would love to hear your opinion on today's webinar and in general YALSA's webinars, so I will also send you an evaluation link. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all. Bye.
So much.